Brendan Batchelor joining us from Sportsnet 650 from the West Coast. Good friend of the program. Great guy. How you doing, Batch?
Good to see you. How are you?
It's been far too long. Very well. You're set up and sounding very clear. Seems to me like you've been doing a lot of home interviews. Would I be correct in the last little while?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly last season, especially because we weren't on the road with the hockey team. So most of the interviews we did were over Zoom or remotely. So we've been hosting shows and doing all sorts of things from home. All of our show hosts have it at 650 as well. So we're getting used to it, I guess, now.
Yeah, wonderful technology here in 2020, 2021 for sure has made things a lot easier. So we're on the cusp of the season. I can't tell me what they're going through in BC because the Canucks are BC's team, not just Vancouver's. Optimistic, even pessimistic, how are they feeling? Because I was thinking about this morning, Batch. Every team 0-0 tied right now. So what's the sense out there for their team going into camp?
Well, it's probably all of the above that you were mentioning, depending on who you talk to. There's people in Vancouver that are very optimistic with the changes that Jim Benning made to this hockey club in the offseason, most notably, of course, the trade bringing in Connor Garland and Oliver Ekman-Larsen. There are pessimists that believe that Ekman-Larsen's best days are behind him and that the $7+ million that he's going to cost the Canucks against the salary cap over the next few years is going to be more of a negative than a positive. But in general, the sense of things that I get is that people are excited for the hockey season to be back, excited to potentially be back in attendance at games at Rogers Arena here in Vancouver, and cautiously optimistic that this is a Canucks team that can put that dreadful season from last year behind them and get back into the playoff picture in the Pacific Division.
Well, Batch, you called those games. You had a summer to mull it over, and I'm sure you spent a lot of time thinking about what went wrong for the Canucks. Did you put your finger on anything? I'm sure you're tired of talking about it, but you know what was it, do you think, that caused them to miss the playoffs with that talented lineup?
Well, when you look at last season, it's more about, not saying what went wrong, but what went right. And the answer to that question is not much. They had the largest COVID outbreak in the NHL. Elias Pettersson, their top player, missed more than half of the season with an injury and struggled out of the gate to start the year as well. They had lost a couple of key veterans from the offseason before, guys like Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom that ended up in Calgary that I think probably, threw off a bit of the chemistry in the room as well. And just all of those things came together to, combine for a dreadful season for the Canucks that concluded in them playing regular season games against the Flames that meant nothing except, positioning for the standings after the playoffs had already begun. So I think both for the players, for the organization, for fans, and for those of us that covered it as well, it's a season we want to put behind us and hopefully move on to better things this year.
So, and thank you for that and for looking ahead now. With OEL there, Oliver Ekman-Larsen, a perennial all-star in Arizona. I've watched him a ton of times with the Coyotes, and I don't think that his best years are behind him. And you've seen him play enough, tremendous player. The one thing a lot of the analysts have said on this show from Vancouver is that the blue line, if there was a weak area, is that. How much can he shore up on his own from there? What's been done to address that blue line of the Canucks, if that is in fact an Achilles heel, if there is one?
Yeah, I would say that Oliver Ekman-Larsen is probably, if I had to pick one player that could be a make or break player for the Canucks season this year, it's him, because they've brought him in to help solidify the top four on the blue line. Alex Edler has moved on after his entire career spent in Vancouver. And even though he was an aging player, he brought a certain bottom line defensively that they're not going to have anymore. They moved away from Nate Schmidt in the offseason as well. And Edler and Schmidt defensively were one of their better pairings last year, even though it was a season where the Canucks were horrid defensively most of the time. So Ekman-Larsen coming in, if he can regain some of his former form that we saw from him a few years ago. His game has declined over the last few years, and part of that could be the situation in Arizona, and certainly that's what Canuck fans are hoping, is that he's going to come to Vancouver renewed and refreshed and ready to contribute to a team that wants to make a playoff push. But as far as Ekman-Larsen goes, if he can come in and play well, then the Canucks will do well and their blue line will improve. If he continues to struggle, as we've seen in Arizona over the last couple of years, then it's going to be a struggle for the Canucks to keep puck out of their net. Thatcher Demco is something that you're not worried about. He's turned himself into a legitimate starting goaltender in the NHL. The Canucks forward group, through the top 9 especially, is as deep as I've seen it in my time doing this job, now 5 years on the job with the Canucks. So they will be able to score, and they've got goaltending, but it's their defensive core that, will make or break how well they do this year, and Ekman-Larsen is the biggest part of that.
You mentioned crowds. And playing before them. What's the deal for the Canucks with the COVID environment here? Are they full capacity? What's the word?
That seems to be a matter of debate to this point. I think it's probably going to be 50% capacity. And then here in British Columbia now, you will have to prove that you've been vaccinated to attend games, and you have to wear masks indoors as we speak right now in public spaces as well. So only fully vaccinated people at the games, all wearing masks. And you would hope that with those sorts of restrictions, the capacity could be increased to close to 100%, if not 100%, but I would expect 50% to start the season at Rogers Arena anyway.
Myself and our viewers have kind of circled in on 2 main storylines for this season in the NHL. One's the Seattle Kraken. 2 is Jack Eichel. So let's start with the Kraken and what your expectations might be for them, Batch, and how much are people talking about the rivalry already out there?
Yeah, people are excited for that. The first preseason game is, just a couple of weeks away. The Canucks and the Kraken for Seattle's first game ever as a team in the NHL. As far as how the Kraken will do, I like the fact that they bring in Philip Grubauer between the pipes. They've got a solid defensive core. My thoughts on them are more, are how are they going to score goals? Because they don't have the forward depth that you would expect. And I expect that will be their issue this year, is they're going to be defensively sound. They've got good goaltending, but they may not be able to get timely scoring with the forward group they've got. But that said, many people were counting Vegas out before the start of their first year, and we all know how that ended. So I'll be interested to see how the Kraken do. And I think right now in BC anyway, there's a sense of excitement about the rivalry. That excitement may shift very quickly if the Kraken, beat the Canucks in their first regular season meeting, which is just a couple of weeks into the season.
And what a shame the border situation is what it is, where you could have had fans going back and forth, Batch. And it will happen eventually, I think. But do you have any neutral site games? Are you going to Penticton for a rookie tournament like usual? What's the deal on the preseason for the Canucks?
Yeah, no rookie tournament this year. That neutral site game that I mentioned, or the Seattle-Vancouver game that I mentioned, rather, is at a neutral site in Spokane, Washington. Nice. So that's not one that Canuck fans will be able to get to, but the good Spokane Chiefs fans in the WHL are going to get an NHL preseason game. And then the Canucks are playing in Abbotsford, having one game there because, of course, they have their new AHL affiliate that's been relocated from Utica to Abbotsford, so just down the highway in the Fraser Valley from Vancouver. So they're going to play a preseason game out in the Valley. And other than that, they're in NHL buildings the rest of the way.
We had Peter Labardius on yesterday. Can't remember what he said about travel this year for the broadcasters. Will you be in Spoke, or what's the deal, Batch? What do you know about your travel this year?
It's to be determined still. So I think the powers that be are waiting to see what the COVID situation is right down to the wire. So obviously we're cautiously optimistic that we're going to be back on the road and back in arenas calling games, but that remains to be seen right now.
Amazing with training camp. You're basically on the eve of it, right? But I get it. I feel sorry for these leaders in sports trying to come up with the answers to this. Jack Eichel. What's the buzz? What do you hear? Is he going to be playing in Buffalo this year or not, Brendan?
Yeah, it's one of those stories that, even you talk to guys like Elliot Friedman and people that are, much more tapped into these sorts of stories than I am, certainly, and they don't even have a feel for where it's going right now. It seems like it's all quiet. There was a lot of talk about maybe he ends up in Calgary, but then we saw the Flames commit some salary cap money to some signings here in the last few days, which, could indicate that they're out of that mix. So to be honest, I don't have a great idea on what's going to happen with Jack Eichel. You would have thought that by this point, the Sabres would have wanted to get this deal done and not have it be a storyline about is he going to report to training camp or not. But that said, training camp is coming very quickly here, and there's still no answer. So I'll be interested, just like all your viewers, I'm sure, to see how it plays out here in the next few weeks.
From Rocco, our technical producer, has a question for you. He says, when can we expect Pedersen and Hughes to get a final contract offer. What's popping there, Batch?
Yeah, so both of them are restricted free agents, and both of them remain unsigned as of this point. Training camp starts on September the 22nd for the Canucks, so they're getting down to the wire here. But historically, we've seen the Canucks use training camp and the start of the season as a pressure point to get these deals done. Brock Besser missed the first couple of days of training camp in 2019 before he got his contract done. Bo Horvat signed his contract just a couple of days before training camp. So, looking at how the Canucks have negotiated these deals in the past, I wouldn't be concerned about Pedersen and Hughes just yet, because it seems like they like to leave it to the last minute or use that start of the season as a pressure point to negotiate and get these deals done. I would be more concerned if we're getting into the preseason or close to the regular season and these guys are missing games, but I honestly don't expect that to happen. I think they'll have that contract for both Hughes and Pedersen tied up in the next couple of weeks.
And I always ask you this, if you remember near the end of our interviews, you are Vancouver Giants alum, proud Dub guy, gone to the National Hockey League, carrying the banner, I feel, for a lot of Western League broadcasters. How much you've fallen what the Giants are doing, and your thoughts on the fact that for October anyways, they're not going to be able to go into the States.
Yeah, I've heard some good things coming out of training camp about the group they've assembled. They've got a couple of Swedish import players that are going to come in and hopefully have good years for them. One of them, potentially could play for them this year, was taken high in the draft by the Bruins. So that's exciting for the fans here. And, much like, we talk about with the Canucks, I'm sure there are many Giants fans that are just excited to get back into the Langley Event Center and watch the team in person. And, that border issue is going to be something that will really affect junior hockey much more than the NHL, because we know the teams are going to be able to fly back and forth across the border. But for the Western Hockey League or even the BCHL, because they have the Wenatchee Wild that play in that league, there's going to be issues. And, in terms of Wenatchee, I understand that they are coming up to Canada because it's much easier to come across the border that way, and are starting the season with like a month-long road trip north of the border in BC, because they're the only American team in the league. So if they were down there, they wouldn't have anyone to play. And I guess both the leaders in the BCHL and the WHL are hoping that we get some clarity on the border sooner rather than later, so it doesn't throw a wrench into their seasons down the line.
I knew you'd be on top of it. Brendan, as always, this has been fun, man. Enjoy the games. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rod. Appreciate it.
The voice of the Vancouver Canucks, Brendan Batchelor from Sportsnet 650 Radio. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of The Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.